After their first date, which was both impressive and quite the disaster at Eros's location X, Psyche felt incredibly confused and exhausted. The one-of-a-kind dating locations the god of love had chosen, from the Garden of Eden on a rooftop parking lot to an over-the-top 4D cinema and a mythological snack bar with hard-to-swallow food and an astronomical bill, had clearly shown Psyche the vast difference between her world and the world of the gods. Despite all this, Eros was still incredibly excited and believed Psyche had a wonderful evening. With his overconfidence, the god of love decided to take Psyche to meet his family on Mount Olympus, completely unaware that this was the very door leading to a top-notch family drama. Eros led Psyche along the gilded corridors of Olympus' home, a smile never leaving his handsome face. Deep down, Eros was overflowing with pride and hope. He believed that once his family, especially his beloved mother, met Psyche, they would immediately recognize her wonderful qualities. Psyche's kindness, intelligence, and simple yet captivating beauty would surely conquer everyone's hearts. Eros completely overlooked the vague worries flitting through Psyche's mind, busily painting a beautiful picture of a family-supported relationship. Meanwhile, Hermes leisurely followed behind, his cunning eyes constantly observing the couple. In the messenger god's head, a silent play was unfolding, filled with sarcastic commentary. "Oh, for heaven's sake, this naive little brother is really innocent. Bringing a mortal girl to meet Aphrodite, there's definitely going to be a Category 12 hurricane, then he'll come running to me for help again. Sigh, what bad luck." Hermes shook his head slightly, whistling a cheerful tune under his breath, as if preparing to enjoy a comedy movie with a predetermined ending. When Psyche stepped into Olympus' home, she couldn't help but be overwhelmed by the breathtaking extravagance and splendor. Everything was meticulously and exquisitely crafted, from the pure white marble statues to the solid gold flower vases. The sweet scent of exotic flowers mingled with a faint, mysterious fragrance, perhaps the scent of ambrosia, the food of the gods. The only sounds that could be heard were the trickling of water from intricately carved fountains and a very faint buzzing, perhaps the sound of magic flowing through the air. However, instead of feeling relaxed and comfortable, Psyche felt a surge of unease and tension within her. The absolute silence of the vast mansion made her feel like she was being watched. The divine statues with their stern gazes seemed to be scrutinizing and judging her. Psyche tried to take a deep breath to calm herself, but her chest still tightened with anxiety. "Do I really belong here?" the question echoed in her mind. Eros stopped before a large ebony door carved with figures of flying angels. He turned to look at Psyche, offering her an encouraging smile. "Don't worry, Psyche, my mother might seem a little straightforward, but she's kind-hearted." Psyche tried to return Eros's smile, but doubt lingered in her heart. Straightforward was probably an understatement for what she was imagining about the meeting with the goddess Aphrodite. When the door opened, Aphrodite was already seated on a gilded armchair, her beauty radiant like the sun. Her deep blue eyes were fixed on Psyche, unblinking. In that moment, Psyche felt like she was frozen in place, unable to move or say anything. "Eros, my beloved son, you finally decided to bring your girlfriend to meet me." Aphrodite's voice was as sweet as ever, but Psyche now recognized the sharpness hidden beneath that gentle exterior. "Mother dear, this is Psyche," Eros repeated, looking slightly flustered by his mother's silence. "Psyche, this is my mother, the goddess Aphrodite." Psyche bowed her head again, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Greetings, madam." Aphrodite nodded slightly, a thin smile flickering across her lips. "Welcome, Psyche. Eros has told me so much about you. I'm very curious to know what it is about a mortal girl that could attract my son so much." In her heart, Aphrodite wondered if Eros had been bewitched or enchanted to fall in love with such an ordinary girl. There must be something special, she thought, but her voice carried a distinct hint of skepticism. "Yes, ma'am," Psyche stammered, unsure how to respond. "So then, Psyche, my dear," Aphrodite continued, her eyes still fixed on Psyche, "I want to understand you better. Tell me about your family. What kind of people are they? Where did you grow up? And what have you done to deserve my son's love?" Aphrodite emphasized the last question with a subtle implication, like an unspoken challenge. Psyche felt an invisible pressure weighing down on her shoulders. She tried to take a deep breath and began to tell her story about her carpenter father, her kind mother who always loved her, and her simple life in a small town. When she mentioned her part-time job at a coffee shop, Aphrodite frowned slightly, a sign of displeasure. "A small coffee shop? Is that a stable job for the future, my dear? My Eros is a god, his life will be very different from that of mortals. Do you think you can keep up with that life? Aphrodite asked, her tone seemingly concerned for her son's future, but in reality she wanted to emphasize the difference in status between Psyche and Eros. I will try my best, madam, Psyche replied, feeling her confidence gradually fading away. Aphrodite sighed softly, her gaze sweeping over Psyche's simple attire once more. And your fashion sense is also quite unique. Eros usually prefers girls with a more glamorous and alluring appearance. Do you think you should change your style to suit my son? Psyche felt her face flush. She knew she couldn't compare to the magnificent beauty and luxurious outfits of the goddesses on Mount Olympus. But she had always believed that true beauty came from within, and she didn't want to have to change herself just to please someone else. Madam, I believe that the most important thing is to be true to oneself, Psyche tried to say politely but firmly. Aphrodite smiled faintly, but the smile was not warm. You are quite a girl with character, but sometimes that character can become an obstacle in life, especially when you want to integrate into a different world. After the lengthy interrogation, Aphrodite finally got to the main point. She took Psyche's hand, her tone becoming gentler, but her eyes held an unyielding authority. Psyche, my dear, I'll be honest with you, I don't think you are the right person for Eros. You are just a mortal, your life is short and full of worries and hardships. Eros is a god, my son deserves someone who can share immortality and power with him. You two belong to two different worlds, and I fear this relationship will not have a happy ending. Aphrodite's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over Psyche's heart. She felt like someone had just squeezed her chest. She knew the differences between her and Eros were vast, but she had always hoped that their love could overcome all obstacles. Mother, Eros began, his voice full of worry and indignation. Aphrodite raised her hand to stop her son. Eros, I only want what's best for you. I have witnessed many relationships between gods and mortals end in sorrow and tragedy. I don't want you to go through that. She turned to look at Psyche, her eyes gentle but firm. My dear, I understand that you love my son, but sometimes love is not enough. You should think carefully about your future. Do you really want a life where you always feel small and lost? Psyche bowed her head, not knowing how to respond. She felt a wave of confusion and despair wash over her. Mother, I love Psyche, Eros said resolutely, holding Psyche's hand tighter, and I don't care about the differences. Psyche is the one I want to be with for the rest of my life. Aphrodite sighed, shaking her head in disappointment. My son is so stubborn, but you should remember, if she dares to hurt you, I will never forgive her. Aphrodite's tone was still soft, but it contained a sharp warning. Meanwhile, Zeus, Hera, and Hermes were silently observing and enjoying this dramatic family scene. Zeus chuckled softly, turning to whisper to Hera, look at that, Aphrodite is showing off her national mother-in-law skills. That girl looks terrified. Hera sneered, looking at Psyche with disdain. A weak and ordinary mortal, I don't understand what Eros sees in her. Hermes stood in a corner of the room, whistling softly. What a cozy family introduction. Congratulations to my little brother Eros for officially entering earthly hell. Then he winked at Psyche, whispering, little girl, you should prepare yourself for the next acts. There are still many surprises waiting for you. After the tense interrogation, Aphrodite invited Psyche to a tea party to welcome her to the family. But Psyche quickly realized that this was no ordinary tea party. The tea that was poured had a strange pale yellow color and emitted a strong, unpleasant odor. When Psyche took a sip, a bitter taste spread throughout her mouth, almost causing her to spit it out. The small, delicate pastries arranged on silver platters looked appealing, but when Psyche took a bite, she found them dry and hard as stone, with no flavor whatsoever. Throughout the tea party, Aphrodite constantly asked seemingly innocent questions about Psyche's life, but in reality she cleverly steered the conversation towards her difficulties, failures, and unsuccessful relationships. Each question was like a needle pricking at Psyche's wounds, making her feel hurt and helpless. What kind of life have you always dreamed of, Psyche? Aphrodite asked, her tone seemingly curious. Psyche hesitated for a moment and then replied softly, I only wish for a simple, happy life with the people I love. Aphrodite smiled faintly, but her eyes held a hint of skepticism. Simple and happy, those are the things mortals like you always seek. But do you think Eros will be satisfied with such a simple life? My son is a god, his life must be full of extraordinary and magnificent things. Psyche felt speechless. She didn't know how to answer without hurting Eros or further antagonizing Aphrodite. It wasn't just Aphrodite, the other goddesses on Mount Olympus were also not very fond of Psyche. They were all beautiful, powerful, and of high status, and they couldn't understand why Eros had chosen an ordinary mortal girl like Psyche. Throughout the tea party, Psyche clearly felt the cold shoulder and the scrutinizing gazes of the other goddesses. They deliberately ignored her or only spoke to her in a perfunctory and cold manner. Some goddesses even didn't hesitate to subtly criticize Psyche about her looks, status, and talents. This little girl doesn't seem to have many jewels, does she? She must not be used to the luxurious life here, one goddess adorned with sparkling jewelry said, her tone full of sarcasm. I heard she's just a coffee shop employee. I wonder if she's even qualified to stand next to Eros, another goddess whispered to the person next to her, but intentionally loud enough for Psyche to hear. Psyche felt her face burn with shame and anger. She tried to remain calm and polite, but inside she was screaming. She wanted to stand up and leave this place immediately, but she didn't want to embarrass Eros. After a long evening filled with tension and exhaustion, Psyche felt like she had just gone through a battle. She was completely drained and overwhelmed by the excessive enthusiasm of Eros's family. Sitting alone in the lavishly decorated but cold room, Psyche couldn't help but wonder if she truly belonged in this world. Aphrodite's strong opposition, Hera's coldness, Zeus's teasing, and the other goddesses' subtle criticisms had made her feel incredibly lost and insecure. Should I continue? The question echoed in Psyche's mind. She loved Eros, but was her love strong enough to overcome these enormous obstacles? Could she endure the scorn and opposition of his family, or should she accept the truth that she and Eros belonged to two different worlds and run away now before it was too late? Meanwhile, Eros was facing a serious conversation with his mother. Aphrodite had expressed her dissatisfaction with Psyche frankly, and she asked Eros to think carefully about his future. Son, I don't want you to regret this later, Aphrodite said, her voice full of worry. You deserve someone better, someone who can bring you true happiness. That girl is just a mortal, she will grow old and die. Do you really want to spend your whole life with someone like that? Eros felt incredibly stressed and confused. He loved Psyche, but he also didn't want to upset his mother. He knew his mother's words weren't entirely without reason, but his heart couldn't accept the thought of leaving Psyche. Mother, I love Psyche, Eros tried to explain. She is kind, intelligent, and lovely. I don't care about the differences in our status. I want to be with her for the rest of my life. Aphrodite sighed, shaking her head. My son is so blinded by love, but you should remember that your decision will affect our entire lineage. I hope you will think very carefully before making any decisions. Eros remained silent, not knowing what else to say. He felt caught between love and responsibility, between his heart and his reason. He loved Psyche, but he also didn't want to disappoint his mother. What should he do? In the luxurious yet cold room, Psyche sat quietly on the bed covered with soft, cloud-like silk sheets. The gentle moonlight streamed through the large window, casting a melancholic glow on her face. Aphrodite's words still echoed in her ears like invisible arrows piercing her heart. You are not worthy of Eros. You two are too different. There's no future for you. Psyche hugged herself tightly, trying to dispel the feeling of emptiness and loneliness that enveloped her. She had once dreamed of a love as beautiful as in fairy tales, but perhaps she had been too naive to believe that an ordinary girl like her could find happiness beside a noble god like Eros. The harsh reality was that the distance between them was too great, not only in status but also in their worldviews and values. She remembered Hera's cold gaze, Zeus's mockery hidden behind his smile, and Hermes's veiled advice. Everything indicated that she was not welcome here, that she was a lost outsider in the powerful and proud world of the gods. A tear trickled down Psyche's cheek. She didn't blame Aphrodite, perhaps she only wanted what was best for her son. But that didn't lessen the sadness in her heart. She loved Eros, truly loved him, but was that love strong enough to overcome these barriers? Could she endure the scorn and opposition of his family? Just then, the door to the room creaked open and Eros entered, his face showing a hint of worry. He gently sat down beside Psyche, pulling her into his arms. "What's wrong, Psyche? I'm sorry for what happened tonight," Eros whispered, his voice full of regret. Psyche buried her face in his chest, trying to stifle a sob. "It's not your fault, Eros, I just feel like I don't belong here." Eros tightened his embrace. "Don't say that, Psyche, you belong by my side, I love you, and that's the most important thing." "But your mother and the others, they don't like me," Psyche said, her voice choked with tears. Eros sighed. "I know my mother has her own prejudices, but I believe that in time she will understand and accept you." "Do you really believe that?" Psyche looked up at Eros, her eyes red from crying. Eros looked deeply into Psyche's eyes, his gaze full of sincerity and love. "I do believe it, because I love you and our love will overcome all difficulties." Psyche rested her head on Eros's shoulder, feeling his warmth and protection. She desperately wanted to believe his words, but what had happened tonight still haunted her mind. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the mansion, Eros was having a heated argument with his mother. "Mother, why did you treat Psyche like that?" Eros asked, his voice full of disappointment. "She is a kind and lovely person. I don't understand why you have such prejudice against her." Aphrodite sat on her armchair, her face still holding a cold expression. "Eros, my son, I only want what's best for you. You deserve someone better, someone who can bring you true happiness. That girl is just a mortal. Her life is too short and full of worries. Do you really want to waste your life with someone like that?" "But I love her, mother," Eros said resolutely. "I don't care about the differences in our status. Psyche is the one I want to be with for the rest of my life." Aphrodite sighed. "My son is so blinded by love. You don't understand the difficulties and challenges that a relationship between a god and a mortal will face. You will regret it." "I won't regret it," Eros affirmed. "I believe in my love for Psyche. We will overcome all difficulties together." Aphrodite looked at her son with worried eyes. She loved Eros and didn't want him to suffer any pain, but she also couldn't accept the idea of her son marrying a mortal. "Eros, I'll give you time to think carefully about this, but I still stand by my opinion. She is not suitable for you," Aphrodite said, her tone firm. Eros knew he couldn't change his mother's mind immediately. He needed time and patience to prove to her that his love for Psyche was genuine. In the days that followed, Psyche felt like she was living in another world. Everything on Mount Olympus was so foreign and different from her normal life. She tried to integrate, but the coldness and scrutinizing gazes of the other gods made her feel increasingly lonely and lost. Aphrodite maintained a cold and distant attitude towards Psyche. She made no effort to get to know or accept her. Instead, she always found ways to remind Psyche of the differences between them and that she was not worthy of Eros. One afternoon, as Psyche was strolling through the garden filled with exotic flowers of Olympus, Hermes suddenly appeared beside her. "Hello, little girl," Hermes said with a mysterious smile. "Looks like life here isn't as easy as you thought, huh?" Psyche sighed softly. "You're right, I feel like I don't belong here." "So what are you going to do?" Hermes asked, his cunning eyes looking at Psyche. "Endure the coldness of Eros's family or give up?" Psyche remained silent for a moment and then replied softly, "I don't know. I love Eros, but I'm not sure I can endure this forever." Hermes nodded. "Love sometimes isn't enough. You need to be stronger and more decisive. If you truly love Eros, you have to fight for your love." "Fight?" Psyche asked in surprise. "Who do I have to fight?" "Everyone," Hermes replied, his smile becoming even more enigmatic. "With Aphrodite, with Hera, with everyone who doesn't want you to be with Eros, you have to prove to them that you are worthy of his love." Hermes's words made a glimmer of hope flicker in Psyche's heart. Maybe she shouldn't give up so easily. She loved Eros and she would do everything she could to protect her love. In the following days, Psyche began to try harder to integrate into life on Mount Olympus. She learned how to communicate with the other gods, learning about their customs and traditions. She also tried to show her care and love for Eros, showing him that she truly loved him and wanted to be by his side for the rest of her life. However, things were still not easy. Aphrodite did not change her attitude, and the other goddesses continued to subtly criticize and distance themselves from Psyche. But this time, Psyche no longer felt as scared and helpless as before. She had decided to fight for her love, and she would not give up easily. One evening, as Psyche and Eros were gazing at the glittering stars in the night sky of Olympus together, Eros suddenly turned to look at Psyche with loving eyes. "Psyche," he said, his voice full of sincerity, "I know you've endured a lot these past few days. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better." Psyche smiled, taking Eros's hand. "It's okay, my love. I understand. I won't give up. I will prove to your mother and everyone else that I love you with all my heart and that I am worthy of your love." Eros held Psyche tightly, moved by her resilience and love. He knew that the road ahead of them would be full of difficulties and challenges, but he believed that with their love and determination, they would overcome everything.